Ladies and gentlemen, this might look like an everyday watch, one powered by the excellent ETA 2824, one of the greatest watch movements of all time. A solid Hamilton field watch, a brand as reliable as its movement. But what we have here is a crime scene, and this watch holds the secrets of that crime in its very core. It's a story of a trusting owner and horological miscreants, a story of right and wrong, a watch cast into the wilderness, and finally a story of redemption when the timepiece landed on the gentleman's watch service's bench. Let us proceed. The hero of the story, Rex, took this watch to a repair shop to have it serviced. After 9 months, yes, 9 months, the watch was returned to the owner at some cost. There was an issue, though, when winding the automatic rotor would spin wildly. The repair shop told Rex that the parts to fix this issue were not available. In disappointment and disillusionment, the watch was relegated to a drawer, possibly alongside socks, or maybe in the one below the cutlery drawer, where it could have laid among old batteries and bits of string. The exact circumstances of its placement remain unclear. Who knows how long this watch's wilderness years would have persisted if it weren't for this story's first moment of good luck. Rex happened to come across a Gentleman's Watch Services video on YouTube. We are far, far too humble to use terms like watchmaking god or horological genius, but nonetheless, Rex immediately recognized that there was hope for his watch. On first testing, we witnessed the issue with the automatic rotor, but wait, there was more. Within the hour of being fully wound, the watch stopped and would not restart. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where you join the story as we start our investigation. However, we must issue a fair warning. What lies within this seemingly innocent watch case will captivate the hearts and souls of every Englishman, and even those unfortunates who do not bear that national title. Before attacking this watch willy-nilly with our tools, we shall spend a little time having a look around. Look at this lubrication. There is a lot to unpack here, so many questions. What kind of grease is this? It looks like the kind we might use on a mainspring. None of us are without sin, and everyone has been, on occasion, responsible for incidents of over-lubrication, but this is beyond the pale. It appears to be everywhere, which is horrifying and poses a problem. Should we call out in disgust and despair every time we see an egregious blob of this gunk? Or will we end up sounding like an angry old man shouting at the pigeons in the park? We mean no disrespect to the pigeon-yelling community. They carry out vital work, but our exclamations may become tedious. Here's the plan, dear viewer. Every time you see this yellow lubricant, please be comforted by the thought that we are screaming on the inside. But no matter how egregious this oil is, it is not the reason this watch is not running. There is no power reaching the escape wheel. Let's give the center wheel a little push. And that's all it needed. It is running now. Our guess is there's damage to a tooth or perhaps some contamination, and we push past it with our little nudge on the wheel. We shall take the opportunity to let the power down if one forgets to do this and starts to disassemble the movement, or the power is unleashed onto the train of wheels, typically causing damage to the teeth of the second wheel. I shall repeat, damage to the teeth of the second wheel. Not sure why we laboured that point. Obviously that cannot be the issue with this watch. It's just been professionally serviced. With case clamp screws and stem away, we shall remove the movement ring and decase the watch. Many people use the Presto tool to remove hands, and we have done so too, but it does feel quite violent compared to the smooth control of old-fashioned hand levers. Push the hooks to free the dial feed, and we may then remove the dial and see what's occurring. That is a relief. For the first time during this service, everything looks absolutely as it should. Our wheel away, then we'll turn the movement over. You know the drill. Balance is given refuge in a place of safety while we set about the movement. The balance hairspring and pivots look fine. While we continue the disassembly, let's take a little look at the history of the 2824 movement. As with many examples of innovation, the 2824 emerged from a crisis and desperation. The crisis was cheap, accurate, and more importantly, popular quartz movements about to hit the market. The desperation was the Swiss watch industry's desire to take your money. They needed an automatic mechanical movement that would be reliable, accurate, and cheap. They wanted a movement that could be easily upgraded to reach chronometer standard and to become a base movement with enough power to drive complication. The first version of the 2824 hit the market in 1971, and it quickly established itself as the standard workhorse movement for the industry. Many manufacturers used the movement in their watches, and this continued as the movement evolved to the latest -2 version released in 1982. This status persisted until the Swatch Group began to behave like, well, the Swatch Group, seeking to leverage its dominance in movement manufacturing to take over market share from other watchmakers. It started to reduce and end supply to other brands. Unfortunately for Swatch, this plan was not successful. With the patents for the movement expiring in 2002, Sellita and later other manufacturers filled the gap. Swatch ended up handing over hundreds of millions of dollars of market share to competitors. Despite their shenanigans, with attempts at market manipulation and supply chain restrictions, they did give us a fantastic movement that we suspect will persist as long as mechanical watches exist. Such a relief to have something to distract from this movement. Look at it, more greased than a Philly cheesesteak. We did promise to not keep ranting about the oil situation, but we're only human, and this is an absolute outrage. These people are among us, and you could easily walk past one in the street without knowing what they're doing at their workbenches, except for the oil-stained shirt, a malevolent twisted grin, and perhaps a leaking can of 3-in-1 protruding from a pocket. With all the excitement, we've flown through the keyless and motion works and are already removing the barrel bridge. We think we've moved past the completely understandable shock, pain, and anger at what we're seeing. It is time to focus on acceptance and hope. We are saying nothing. Think nice thoughts, hot buttered crumpets. We shall remove the hack. Very easy to forget this part during assembly. Keep an eye out for it. And now the train of wheels bridge is removed. We shall need to inspect everything closely to find out why the watch keeps stopping. Fourth wheel out first. This wheel holds the second hand. Third wheel is next, then the barrel. And with the barrel gone, we can access the second wheel. And finally, the escape wheel. Some jewels are completely dry, others are washed. It didn't take long to find the issue. Look at the condition of the second wheel. Let's take a moment to visit the ghost of watchmaker past. What was it he said? Take the opportunity to let the power down if one forgets to do this and starts to disassemble the movement, or the power is unleashed onto the train of wheels, typically causing damage to the teeth of the second wheel, damage to the teeth of the second wheel, damage to the teeth of the second wheel, damage to the teeth of the second wheel. And it's not just the second wheel, the mainspring barrel teeth were deformed in the same incident. Luckily, both the barrel and second wheel are available as spare parts and are relatively cheap. And that is the disassembly done. We just need to remove the cap jewels and then pre-clean. Of course, there's a quart, maybe a quart and a half of oil under the shatton. We would have been disappointed if there wasn't. Today has become tomorrow, the watch has been cleaned, and we're all set for reassembly after our incessant complaining about lubrication yesterday. We'd better be at our best. We start by dipping the cap jewels in epilam, and after a short interlude to allow the jewel to dry, we place the oil. The shackling is popped into position. Better to drop it from just above than try to place it. Repeat for the other jewel. Epilam, oil, plop, turn over. These shock springs are not only master escape artists, but also play hide and seek to world champion standards. It's always a relief to restore them to the balance assembly. Here we are then, adding lubrication to the movement, with everyone watching. No pressure. Some here for the mainspring barrel, and some on the lower pivot of the new second wheel. It is an absolute treat to see the movement all squeaky clean and minty fresh. Nothing that it doesn't deserve after what it has been through. Escape wheel, then the third wheel, probably the wheel trickiest to get situated. A little 90-10 for the long fourth wheel pivot. We have already put a little epilane on the end, as we don't want the oil migrating up towards the second hand. Now, it's a matter of finagling the wheels into position. Don't worry if the finagling doesn't work. We'll either bamboozle them or, in extreme cases, boondoggle them into place. We point the train of wheels bridge, hoping for the best, more finagling. Now, it is extremely important to remember that the wheels are in charge. As soon as we try and bust them around, pivots get broken. Drop a screw into its hole and keep everything where it should be with a watchmaker's special stick. The other screws may be added with little fear. What's next? Of course, the barrel bridge. But no, it's the hack. Don't forget the hack. Some of the screws were chewed up and really didn't look very nice, so we've replaced them with new ones. Some blue grease in preparation for the crown wheel. Some here and a little bit there. We'll push the click spring in. We're using the watchmaker's special stick as a safety blanket. It's not really doing anything. The click and the crown wheel are in. A little more blue grease, and the reverse threaded crown wheel screw may return home. The ratchet simple wheel is back, perfectly serviceable, but also very cheap. The pallet fork is returned. The pallet fork jewels, along with the escape wheel teeth, have been dipped in epilam, so any lubrication we apply later doesn't migrate away from these areas. We add some power to the mainspring and install the balance wheel. This serves two purposes. It confirms the work so far has been successful before we move on, and it strips the epilam from the escapement working surfaces, which is where we want the oil to reside. We'll let that run for around 30 minutes, which just happens to be the perfect amount of time for a tea and crumpet break. Pure coincidence. We shall apply some special grease to the pallet fork jewels. It's at times like this we find ourselves thinking of the words of Winston Churchill. Whatever you do, don't bugger it up. That is a little more than perfect, but not so much that we need to start again. We shall continue. The trick with lubrication isn't so much how it's put down, it's how it is picked up. That's a little too much. Let's put some back. If we pick up far too much oil, we should put down far too much oil. We watch the oil get drawn into the pivot and forming a circle on the underside of the jewel. Not great placement, but look, it's still getting drawn into the jewel. That is fine. Over to the keyless and motion works now. Although the 2824 is a robust movement, it does have its foibles, one being the keyless works. When removing the winding stem, the watch must be put into time setting mode first. If it isn't, there is a very good chance that when the stem is reinstalled, the yoke will be pushed out of position and the whole thing will need to be reassembled. Someone hold our horses. The hack isn't engaged with the clutch. Let's try again. With the winding pinion and clutch installed, we move on to the double corrector operating lever. Don't blame us. We don't decide on the name. And, of course, the yoke is next. And this absolute marvel of design and efficiency combined setting lever pressure spring, yoke spring, setting lever spring, named the combined setting lever jumper. We shall insert the stem and a quick function check before moving on. Prepare the way for the remaining parts with some light lubrication. Date corrector, then the date driving wheel and the cannon pinion with driver. The intermediate date driving wheel. Another intermediate wheel. The date jumper. Now we need to get the date wheel into position before we install the next two parts. The date jumper maintaining plate, and of course let us not forget the minute train bridge. Fitting the hands is very different from the rest of watch assembly. We're applying force as a precursor for disaster. With the hands, the careful application of force is required. With the hands back on, there are plenty of checks that they don't bump into each other and that the date changes at the right time. We can put the watch back into its case. We are on the home straight. Movement ring and stem are back. Not much left to do now. Those among you with sharp eyesight and an even sharper mind will have noted we have not seen the automatic works being serviced. This is because initially this watch was not going to be in a video. However, we did manage to identify the cause of the problems with the automatic movement, which of course was far, far too much of the wrong type of lubricant. Case cap screws and a new, freshly greased case-back gasket. And the very final drop of oil, a small deposit for the pivot of the ratchet wheel driving wheel of the soon-to-be-fitted automatic works. Confirm everything is meshed and operating correctly before screwing down. If you have a watch that needs service or repair, check out the Gentleman's Watch Services website. There's a link in the description. You never know, your timepiece might even star in a video. This is running very well now, but the movement is the star of the show. Earlier we described this movement as a workhorse, but really it's all best horses. Rock solid and just a few seconds difference in vertical positions. Of course, there's nothing wrong in spending vast sums of money on in-house movements, but sometimes the workhorse is exactly what we need. What a journey we've been on together, right then? That is it all done? We do trust you continue to have an absolutely marvelous day in all departments.